We're starting in 1 minute. If everyone can take a seat, please. Let's do that after the forum because it's like with 10 minutes behind. Okay, are we on Zoom? Is it recording?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our Defending Immigrant Neighbors Community and Community Support Forum. Sorry for the delay. This presentation is being conducted by the Bronx Defenders, and we have guest speaker Rosa Cohen-Cruz speaking on the behalf of the Bronx Defenders. This forum is supported by the New York City Council members, Carmen De La Rosa, Eric Dinowitz, and Pierina and Sanchez. We're a little behind, so I'll just get right to the presentation. This is ending at 7:25 p.m. If we have time for questions and answers, we will certainly entertain any. And if we don't, if you have any questions and answers and we don't get a chance to take your questions, please write them down. We'll take them and we'll give them to Ms. Cohen-Cruz and make sure that the answers are available. Ms. Cruz?
Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. So my name is Rosa Cohen-Cruz. I'm the Director of Immigration Policy at the Bronx Defenders, and I've been an immigration attorney for over a decade, practicing across New York. I'm not giving individualized legal advice today, just general, these are your rights. That's sort of a disclaimer we always have to give. These are rights that apply to everybody, regardless of their immigration status. And, you know, some of the most effective ways for community members to protect themselves is to exercise their own rights. So I am going to try to share my screen and get started. Just give me 1 second to do that. Oops. I always have my own technical difficulties, even when I practice. All right, 1 second. Here we go. Can you all see this? Can you see my screen? All right, great. So, oops. So this is a Know Your Rights training on immigration. It was updated today. I'll talk through the slides as we go. So we're going to talk about who can be arrested and deported by ICE, what are the rights that everybody has, and then what to do if you or a loved one, a community member is in fact arrested by ICE. And I'm going to go sort of quickly. Someone just speak up if you'd like me to slow down. As a starting point, just to be clear, who can be detained and deported by ICE? Two categories of people who don't have immigration status. That can be because they overstayed a visa. It could be because they lost status some other way. It can be they entered without inspection, which means crossing the border, or people who have immigration status but have had certain criminal legal system contact. People who can be subject to ICE detention include people with a deportation order and people who have been arrested for criminal offenses. Also, really anybody that ICE thinks of as somebody that is deportable, but the folks that most commonly are in immigration detention historically have been in these categories, although that has expanded. This is a really important slide because things have changed a bit in the last couple months. Here we're talking about how quickly might somebody be deported after an arrest. So you have, again, two categories. Most people will only be deported after seeing an immigration judge. They may be in detention during their case, but most of the time, people will have a right to see an immigration judge. if they don't have an order of removal, or if they're not subject to expedited removal, if they have a previous deportation order, but have come back to the United States and have expressed a fear of returning home, and if they've been in the United States for less than 2 years, but are afraid of returning to their home. So that's most people. The exception is there are certain groups of people that can be deported quickly without seeing an immigration judge. That's people who already have a deportation order, or people who are subject to expedited removal, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Unfortunately, the one other group that is now in play here are folks that have been that the United States might be trying to remove under the Alien Enemies Act. The slides don't go into that because it's very in flux, but what I will say is, if for young men from Venezuela with tattoos, I'm sure you've all seen in the news, I strongly advise getting individualized immigration advice if somebody falls into that category. So expedited removal is unfortunately a process that allows ICE to deport certain people without them ever seeing a judge. That applies to people who entered without documents, so that means came across the border within the last 2 years. If someone is afraid of returning to their country of origin, even if they're in this posture, they can tell the ICE officer that they're afraid, and they'll get what's called a credible fear interview, and that will allow review before an immigration judge. Of course, to get that interview, they're going to have to share details about their life and really meet that standard of a credible fear. So you will have to, a lot of this presentation is about not sharing information with ICE. This is a situation where you would have to share sufficient details about your fear of return. A person cannot be deported without the opportunity to see a judge if you've been in the United States for 2 years or more, came in with a visa that was not obtained by fraud, so even if it expired, already have a court date with an immigration judge, or came in as an unaccompanied minor. Again, we're going to sort of put the Alien Enemies Act piece to the side because that is kind of a separate piece. So this is all really about just expedited removal, but it is important for folks to know if you've been in the United States for less than 2 years and you came in without inspection, or sorry, for more than 2 years and you came in without inspection, you can gather proof to make it clear that expedited removal shouldn't apply. So really just proof of your life in the United States, bills, school records, birth records, licenses, IDs, tax payment, your lease, any type of thing that might show that you've been in the United States. If folks are worried about being arrested in the community, they can carry documents like this, or having trusted people save them, so that way if they are arrested by ICE, they can quickly provide evidence to show that they've been living in the United States for more than 2 years. In New York, we see most arrests taking place at home and at ICE check-ins at 26 Federal Plaza. So there are some people that are already sort of in a relationship with ICE where they have to check in at certain dictated appointments. And unfortunately, we've seen a huge increase in arrests at those check-ins. So for folks that have those kinds of check-ins, really important again to talk to an attorney and get individualized advice. And we've also seen some arrests in workplaces and public spaces, but that's less common than directly in the home. We did want to flag that folks who've had criminal legal system contact are at greater risk, even for people who are lawful permanent residents. Fingerprints are shared in various databases, so ICE is more likely to be aware of someone, and certain criminal convictions can cause individuals to lose their lawful permanent residence. So again, the takeaway here is if you've had any contact, even an arrest that ends in a dismissal, it's more likely that somebody's information has been shared with ICE, and so it's important to talk to an attorney. So now we're going to get to what are your rights, because this is the really important, like, how do we protect ourselves? That first slide was sort of who's being targeted. Now we're getting into what are the rights. Again, please tell me, I can't see you. I can only see my presentation, so please do tell me if I should slow down. Okay, so everyone has the right to refuse entry. This is just an overview. Everyone has the right to refuse entry into your home, to refuse a search of your home. A home includes, public housing, apartments, the whole, it is a good definition of home. Everyone has the right to remain silent, refuse to sign documents. You have the right to film or photograph an ICE arrest as long as you don't intervene or try to stop an arrest. You have the right to ask an officer to identify themselves and even directly ask, who are you? Are you NYPD? Are you ICE? What agency are you from? You do not have the right to lie, give false documents, or physically interfere, and doing any of those things can make cases more difficult down the line. And I'm going to go through all of these in more detail. So in home raids, wanted to flag some patterns we see. They often happen early in the morning when someone may be going to work, just leaving the house on their route somewhere. Often it's multiple officers who are armed, dressed in generic clothing. I'm sure many people saw the video of the officers apprehending the young woman in Boston. And she was, and you could see that they were dressed in black sweatshirts in many cases and didn't have clearly identifying, tags on their outfits. Sometimes they will identify themselves as police or just wear a vest, like you see here, it says police, and then in smaller letters underneath it says Immigration Custom Enforcement. So sometimes people think it's police, but it's actually ICE. And we do see an increase in collateral arrests, which means if they go to someone's house looking for a specific person, but there are other people there who they believe could be under their jurisdiction, they believe are subject to deportation, they will arrest everybody, not just the person that they were targeting. So what are your rights in your home? Every person has rights regardless of their immigration status. Law enforcement, including ICE, is not allowed to enter a residence without a warrant signed by a judge or consent. So it is really important, if you do not want ICE to enter your home or any law enforcement and they do not have a warrant, make sure you don't give consent. Typically, they only have civil warrants, and I do have a slide that shows the difference between a civil warrant, which does not authorize ICE to enter, versus a judicial warrant, which is a warrant issued by a court, in which case ICE then does have authority to enter. So you'll see two different types of warrants, and I'd have a picture of them and we'll talk through the differences. A civil warrant has been issued by ICE themselves and it's also called an administrative warrant, and it does not actually give them the authority to enter private property without consent. So just to invoke your rights, you want to make sure you, if you don't want law enforcement to enter your home and they don't have a judicial warrant, you have the right to refuse to open the door. You have the right to ask them to leave. You have the right to remain silent. So here are the warrants that we have. The one that says United States District Court on the top is a judicial warrant or court-issued warrant. That one does give ICE the authority to enter a household. The other one, the one that says U.S. Department of Justice, Immigration Naturalization Services, it says warrant of removal and deportation. That one is an administrative warrant. It is issued by ICE themselves, and it does not give them the authority to enter. So really important to know the difference between these two warrants. The administrative warrant, like I said, is just issued by ICE. It will often be signed by an ICE officer or a deportation officer, someone from the Department of Homeland Security, whereas a judicial warrant will be signed by a judge. So that is the major difference. So you see this big cross through the one that is not a valid warrant. Feel free to take a picture of these. I recommend, you can even hang a picture by your door. If somebody comes to your house and says that they have a warrant, you can ask them to send you a picture of it. You can ask them to put it up to a keyhole, you can ask them to slide it under the door, and you have a right to look at it before making any decisions. So you can also send it to someone else to kind of do this comparison. But I do recommend having a picture of this. So I'm going to just leave this up for a minute so you can take a picture if you want. I'll also send the slides afterwards because this is a really critical distinction and important for exercising your rights. Since ICE doesn't usually carry judicial warrants, they usually carry these administrative warrants, they will sometimes try to trick residents into opening the door, because the other way they can get in if they don't have a judicial warrant is through consent. So they will sometimes try to trick people by saying that they're there to investigate a crime, they're NYPD. They may say that you yourself have been the victim of identity theft or another crime. And they may even claim that they have authority to enter and really try to bully people. If they do enter your home, you always have the right to ask them to leave, as long as they don't have that judicial warrant. The best thing to do is continue to deny entry as long as they don't have the authority to enter. And you know, that's a much safer way to move forward. So that's kind of your rights in the home. That's where your rights are strongest. When public places are a little more challenging because ICE does not need that judicial warrant to arrest someone in public or to stop a car, they do need to have reasonable suspicion to believe someone is here in violation of immigration law, and they cannot detain someone based on their race or appearance or language alone. That does not give someone authority to stop and arrest the person. So in public places, everyone has a right to remain silent when a law enforcement agent, including ICE, asks them a question. If you do not wish to speak to law enforcement, you can say clearly, I'm invoking my right to remain silent. I do not want to answer questions. I know many folks have been giving out the red cards that have the rights and sort of that invocation written on it. You can always read that card directly if that feels more comfortable. You cannot lie. You cannot give false documents. Either of those can create problems for you down the line or create a basis for an arrest. In terms of carrying identity documents, people generally aren't required to show ID to law enforcement. If someone without immigration status gives ICE a fake document or an ID that shows that they weren't born in the United States, ICE can use that against the person in their cases. And people over 18 who have been issued valid US immigration documents, including green cards or lawful permanent resident cards, those are the same thing, are legally required to carry those with them. In a private business, there are other rights that can be invoked by the kind of primary person in charge of the business or the owner of the building. In some cases, a lot depends on the type of business. So it's always important to have kind of a conversation with an attorney or someone who understands the business. But generally speaking, areas that are open to the public in a business are also open to ICE. So a restaurant, for example, that has open seating, that area would be available to ICE, but you know, the kitchen area in the back would not. And so to enter those private areas, like a back room or kitchen area, something not open to the public, they need that same judicial warrant that we looked at before, again, or consent to enter those areas. Workers do not have to talk to ICE. They do not have to let them into private areas. It is really important that people don't try to run or try to escape, because that can put people in danger and give ICE a justification to detain them. But employers do not have to help ICE identify or sort workers or give them information about workers. So again, to invoke your rights, you want to say, I don't want to answer any questions without a lawyer, and you're allowed to continue to remain silent even if they ask you questions. We get a lot of questions about, is New York a sanctuary city? And yes, I mean, there's no real definition of what a sanctuary city is, but a collection of certain laws give some additional protections in New York, and I did want to flag those. One is, the green light law on the state level that passed in 2019 means that the DMV will not be sharing information with ICE. We have detainer laws in New York City that prevent and public resources laws that prevent city agencies from sharing information with ICE in most cases. There are exceptions to those laws we're not going to jump into. And then there's also this court decision, Francis, which says that ICE cannot, or city and state employees cannot hold someone just for ICE purposes. So if someone's supposed to be released on bail or something like that, they cannot continue to hold them just for ICE to come. If they arrest someone for another reason or stop someone for another reason, and then that reason ends, they cannot continue to detain them for ICE, and they cannot make an arrest just for ICE purposes. Generally speaking, city agencies shouldn't be working with ICE or sharing information. Again, there are some exceptions to that rule. And so if you do learn of a collaboration, we always ask to share that information because we want to make sure that it's investigated and we know, if there's a possible violation of sanctuary laws. We also passed the Protect Our Courts Act in 2020, we meaning New York State. So ICE is forbidden from making arrests inside of a state, city, or municipal courthouse. And they're also not meant to be arresting people going to or leaving the courthouse. It's a little bit kind of fuzzy on how far that extends. And ICE has shown up in some courts, although to my knowledge, they haven't actually made an arrest in a court since this law has passed. But again, this is also something to share if it does happen. It would be very important for people to know. So now, like, the last really important piece, and as I said, I was going to move kind of quickly here, what to do if you or a loved one is arrested by ICE. The key is, a lot of this is going to come down to how do you help support them, gather documents, and help them find an attorney. So number one is documents. You want to make sure that documents are in a safe place, that you have copies of them, documents that show proof of how long someone has lived in the United States, medical records, court records, school tax records, things like that. You want to have authorization to share medical records, particularly if people have serious medical needs, to try to, if someone is detained, quickly get medical records to the detention facility and hopefully get them some medical care. There is unfortunately abysmal medical care in ICE detention, and many people do leave ICE detention with chronic illnesses that they didn't have when they entered. You can give power of attorney to family members, which can be revoked at any time, and then standby guardianship if there are children. There is a really good resource for standby guardianship on the Immigrant Defense Project's website for folks in New York City that can help walk through the process of how to assign guardians for children. So I'm happy to share that website after the presentation. It's very helpful information and really important if there's a risk that children would be left without their parents if parents are detained. Also, it's great to have what we call a buddy system, where you have somebody that you check in with regularly, particularly for folks who are at high risk. I've mentioned the Alien Enemies Act a couple of times for folks who are, from Venezuela and have tattoos or may otherwise be subject to some of these other things we've talked about, like expedited removal. Really regular, frequent check-ins are a good idea. So somebody is aware if they don't hear from you quickly that detention or deportation may have happened. It's helpful to make sure that the person you're checking in with has access to documents, can, use a computer, has access to, some contact information of other important people to call. So that way they can sort of help navigate that situation. To find somebody who you think has been detained, there is this ICE detainee locator. You can take a picture of this. You could also Google ICE detainee locator. They don't immediately update it, so it's not always accurate, but it is within a couple days usually updated. There's also the court information line. So if someone is going to be in removal proceedings, you can call this to find out when their next hearing will be. You do need to know their A number. For green card holders, their A number is on their green card, or if people have, been in contact with this system and have like have had certain applications, the A number will be on the forms. And absolutely, if someone is aware of their A number, that's something that should be included in the trusted documents that they save and share with trusted friends. And then this is the New York City field office number that you can also try to call to get information. So I'm gonna just give a second for anyone who wants to take a picture of this slide. After an arrest, ICE can ask more questions and will make a decision about whether to detain or release someone. We do see more detentions right now. If someone is released, they will most likely get a date to go to immigration court. If they're detained, the ICE detention facilities in this region are in Orange County, New York, Buffalo Federal Detention Center, which is in Western New York, near Buffalo. The Elizabeth Detention Center is Elizabeth Detention Center and Delaney Hall in New Jersey, and then Moshannon in Pennsylvania. That's where most people who are arrested in New York kind of go immediately. There are a couple of other jails. Broome County just started detaining people for ICE. Nassau County now has a facility where they will hold people for sort of staging before transferring them to other places. Unfortunately, Rensselaer County also sometimes holds people. So there are a number of county jails across the state that will also have contracts to hold, to rent their bed space basically out to ICE for detention purposes. Not everybody will qualify for a bond hearing. There's something called mandatory detention that can be based on criminal history. And if somebody is eligible for a bond, it's really important to have strong evidence to show that that you warrant bond. And so family members or community members or trusted friends can help gather that evidence, because it's difficult for people who are in detention to do that. The key things you want to show is that you're not a danger to the community and you're not a flight risk. The best ways to show that are showing strong family ties in the United States, histories of public service, getting letters of support from schools and faith communities and things like that can be really helpful. Even if you have criminal legal system history, unless you're subject to mandatory detention, you can still get bond. So it's still worth gathering this evidence and trying to get bond. If someone has already been ordered deported, they're again in a slightly different posture. Or if you crossed within the last 2 years, this is going back to the earlier slide. So then things can move much more quickly. And the advice there is, again, to try to, if somebody is afraid of being returned to their country based on fear of violence or torture or persecution, they need to tell ICE about that fear, and they may get review by a judge. So in New York City, we have something called the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project. So this slide is about how do you get an attorney? I just talked about, the many difficult pieces of a bond hearing and people who are in detention will go through removal proceedings while in detention in many cases. And in New York, we have a city-funded program, the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project, that is run by Legal Aid, us, the Bronx Defenders, and Brooklyn Defender Services. And many people will qualify for free representation through this program. So just wanted to go through eligibility really quickly. Someone will be eligible if they're either detained and venued in a New York City court, or they're a New York City resident and detained and venued at the Elizabeth Court, which can include folks in those, the Pennsylvania jail and honestly, even many jails outside of this area. I will mention that we have seen a huge increase in transfers. What we are asking community members to do is for anybody that has been detained by ICE, just make a referral and we can assess eligibility. You need to send us their name, their A number, and their date of birth. If you don't have some of that, just please still make a referral. You should send an email to all 3 of the organizations that run the program, and the emails are here. Please take a picture of them again or write them down. It's knifeupintake@bronxdefenders.org, knifeup@legal-aid.org, and knifeupintake@bds.org. And that will go to all 3 organizations. And, we'll follow up to assess eligibility and hopefully really quickly identify the person and try to take on representation. And that's it. So now I will come back to see you all. And we can, if there are questions, I'm happy to take some questions. I know I just went through quite a lot of information.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a great presentation, Ms. Cruz. Okay, so those who have a question, we'll bring you a mic. And if you,
Thank you, Rosa, for your question. I'm Reverend Robert Fultz Morrison. Being in court down at 26 Federal Plaza this morning, I noticed there were a lot of people there without any attorneys, and many that spoke different languages. Could you say more about how we as citizens can accompany people while they're in court and help them during the process, and anything else post, because they're going for hearings, some for the first time, some for many times, some for final hearing as one was today. Could you say more about how we can help?
Yeah, there are some court accompaniment programs. Since we're more in the attorney provider space, I don't have them at the top of mind, but I'm happy to send them if there's follow-up materials sent out. There are a couple court accompaniment programs. There's also, you can try, especially for folks who are checking in with ICE, which is different than court, but also at 26 Federal Plaza, you can try to accompany people to those check-ins, although I will say people are often turned away. You can show up to court at 26 Federal Plaza, enter the building, and sit in these courtrooms, which are public. Once again, sometimes people who show up are turned away, even though these are public spaces, and there are certain types of claims where they may ask people to leave, especially if it's an asylum claim or something where they're trying to keep the person's confidentiality may be an important consideration. So yeah, there's, it's people can always show up and try to go in the court. Going through a program sometimes makes it easier. And I'll send the information, the accompaniment. There's like an ICE Watch program that I can send, a Court Watch program. I can send that information for follow-up.
Two groups that were there were New Sanctuary Coalition,
yeah,
and also the African Communities Together.
Yes.
They were today.
Yeah, New Sanctuary Coalition was started by Robbie Rogbier, who many people probably know. His case, he received a pardon actually at the end of this year, but he had a long, or the end of last year, he had a long kind of battle in immigration court and has done incredible work supporting other folks going through their proceedings. So they're a great resource, and our ACT is also a great resource, yeah.
wait, Jalen, she needs a microphone, and then Bob and Betty.
Hello, I came late, so I don't know if you answered this question already. Did you explain the rulings that came down today and how that impacts people? And, especially those directly affected by those rulings. And secondly, the issue of bond, is that cash bond, or is it just bond on their own recognizance, or whatever the term is?
So to start with the first question, I mentioned the Alien Enemies Act. I don't think I explicitly said that the Supreme Court overturned there had been a TRO, a temporary restraining order, preventing planes from continuing to go to El Salvador, to the prison there, which is, well known for having horrific conditions where people are subject to torture and indefinite detention, forced labor. At one point, it was said that the only way people leave that facility is in a coffin. So that is a very serious, horrific place where people are being tortured right now. And in terms of sort of what is happening with that, it's very much in flux. It's like the rapid updates. So I'm not going to go too much into it, but for folks who sort of fall under the profile that ICE has been targeting, which is mostly young Venezuelan men with tattoos, that they are alleging have gang affiliations. I'm sure many of you have read, the details around that many of these tattoos are things like their mother's name or something completely unrelated, and there's this evidence is very flimsy. But for folks in that category, the advice is really that you must talk to an immigration lawyer, have really regular check-ins like we were talking about. Those are folks who are at high risk for removal without due process. And so it is really important to, be in communication with folks and make sure that that you have individualized advice.
Thank you for all the information you shared. You mentioned that people are subject to removal for certain criminal offenses. And you also mentioned there's mandatory detention for certain crimes. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about felonies, misdemeanors, violations, or all of the above, or a combination?
Yeah, it's a combination. The kind of complexity of immigration law is that there are federal definitions for offenses and then state crimes, and they're not always easily aligned. There are, categories of things called crimes involving moral turpitude, for example, which are sort of don't have very clear definitions. There are certain categories of offenses that the government is more likely to claim falls into those categories. So it is like that. There are hours long sort of trainings on what types of crimes they are, but they can include misdemeanors. They can include turnstile jumps, like that's theft of services. They can include, really low level offenses. They can, and then there's also discretionary denials of bond. Oh, I just realized I didn't answer the bond question. I'll come back to that. So, certain offenses, including first offenses or low level offenses, can cause discretionary denials of bond. We often regularly see people who have been arrested and have had their cases dismissed still be denied bond and discretion just because they had a case. Or something we see is someone will be arrested but then not brought to court, and so their case will remain open and they're not able to go to court to close out their case regardless of what the evidence is or anything like that. And then because they have an open case, an unresolved open case, a judge will deny them bond. It often doesn't matter what the charges are. So yeah, it can be anything from no conviction causing someone to be denied bond to serious convictions. It's the full range. But mandatory detention can include misdemeanors as well. And there's some great resources online if you're very interested in that. There's lots of good trainings on mandatory detention and the criminal grounds of deportation.
I wanted to follow up on the question of what bystanders can and cannot do. I understand that you cannot interfere with the process while it's underway. If I recall correctly, there was a video of the graduate student from Tufts up in Boston, and if I remember correctly, the ICE officers did not identify themselves and did not have identification. And at one point, somebody said, "Is this a kidnapping?" Because there was no identification. So if you're and somebody videoed this, obviously a bystander videoed it. If you're a bystander, can you ask whoever is taking the person into custody, are you with ICE? What's your name? How far can you go in asking the arresting officers to identify themselves?
Yes, you can ask, but if there is like a claim that you're interfering, it's really important, that you are careful not to interfere because you don't have the right to interfere. You do have the right, and what is recommended usually in bystander trainings is videoing taking photographs, trying to not include the face of the person who's being targeted, but getting clear, identifying details of the officer themselves. If you can get a nameplate, that's really helpful. Often in those situations, your best role is documenting, but you can ask at the outset, you can help them sort of assert their right to identify themselves. I did want to answer that bond question. I'm sorry, it keeps slipping my mind. It is a cash bond. It's amount of money. There's an organization called Envision Freedom Fund that raises money to help people pay immigration bonds. There used to be a really big problem with these sort of predatory bond companies that charged huge big fees to people to be able to get the money to bond out their loved ones. And New York State passed a bill last year or 2 years ago that really helped like tamp down those abuses. An Envision Freedom Fund is an incredible organization that helps people pay their bonds. They also do some commissary support for people who are in detention. So I highly recommend if you know somebody who is in that situation, or if you're looking for a way to help, they're a great organization to give resources to because they go directly to helping people bond out of ICE detention.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz, for your presentation. I have a question about criminal court proceedings. Let's say a defendant has an ACD or 24020 and petitions the court for an immediate sealing. Will that protect the defendant from potential ICE moving against them?
Once someone has been arrested, their fingerprints are in the system. So getting an immediate sealing will not protect that information from being shared. So to that end, unfortunately, the answer is no, like that ship has already sailed. There are certain times when having an ACD can be harmful. Like if somebody's trying to naturalize, it's considered an unresolved case. And so it would actually prevent them from being able to naturalize. And we did see some success with immediate sealings and people being able to move forward with naturalization. So that it's a slightly different answer than the question you asked. In terms of if you have an ACD with immediate sealing, would that be used against someone in a bond hearing? It could go either way. That would depend on a judge. And they would still have to disclose, like in a bond hearing, you have to disclose your criminal legal system contact. So the sealing wouldn't prevent them from being aware of it, because once you're at that stage in proceedings, like the person would have to share what their case history is.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the audience? Okay, thank you, Ms. Cruz. I just want to let the audience know that if you've signed in on the email, we will email you the presentation, and the information will also be on our website and our Facebook. Do you put on Facebook as well? But before we close off, we have a few minutes. Councilmember Eric Dinowitz sent his chief of staff, Jenna Kloss, so I'll give you the floor.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here tonight. My name is Jenna. I'm here on behalf of Councilmember Eric Dinowitz. And we thought it was really important to have a presence tonight about this, crucial issue. And I think at the top, I want to say that Councilmember Dinowitz staunchly stands and has always stood with the immigrant community, especially under this current administration's cruel attacks across the board. And we'll get into it a little bit, but they're far-reaching. There are a lot of threats that we're facing. The federal government is making life harder and more dangerous for immigrants. There are ways that Councilmember Dinowitz and the City Council are working to combat those attacks. I'll let you know a little bit about the current landscape and what we're doing to combat these policies and anti-immigrant sentiment and rhetoric that demonizes them. So just from the federal level, that's trickling down to the city right now. The federal DHS closed 3 oversight agencies that impact immigrants of all statuses. So they shut down the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman, and Office of Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman. When it comes to the legal rights of immigrants in New York City, the City Council has invested a lot in making sure that people know the rights and have legal representation. That effort was funded for about $25.1 million for FY 2025. In the budget, there's also some initiatives such as Action NYC and Protect NYC Families. This provides free legal support for those who need it, partnering with organizations like CUNY Citizenship Now and NILAG, and some others you've heard of. And expanding Know Your Rights, which we'll go over a little bit, and I know Bronx Defenders went over that as well. And anti-deportation efforts and family reunification. Another thing that the council did recently was allocate $1.4 million for something called the Community Interpreter Bank, which now requires all city agencies and any public-facing materials to be in multiple languages. And we think that's really important. It will go a long way. Sorry, it'll go a long way. It's not just helping people, it's also a symbol that we care for this community and that their rights matter to us. Councilmember Dinowitz, I want to talk a little bit about his work specifically because he's been doing a lot of work in this space, but also has been since he's been in office. Individually, he put significant investments into legal services for the immigrant community, including CUNY Citizenship Now. We recently hosted a Know Your Rights training. We had dozens of people on the Zoom to learn about what happens if ICE shows up to your home, workplace, or other location. We have gone out into the community with Eric personally handing out these materials, and we post on our social media in multiple languages. But even before Trump, even his, position that he was just elected to last year, even before all of this, since being elected, Councilmember Dinowitz has made an effort to support the immigrant community in every way that we can. This includes a shelter that opened up in Wakefield, where Councilmember Dinowitz spearheaded a successful effort to get PS16, one of the local schools, in something called the Open Arms Program, which is a DOE initiative that helps support newly arrived students with language access and other types of wraparound services that they need to thrive. For the past 3 years, we have had free legal services weekly at Mashalou Montefiore Community Center in Norwood. They have been there every week for 3 years. We've been able to help hundreds and hundreds of people with their immigration issues. And then also, he, for a short stint, was chair of the Veterans Committee at the council. During that short stint, he decided to hold a hearing on immigrant veterans and bring light to their unique experiences. So a little bit more about the council. When it comes to detention and deportation, ICE is pushing things like access to IRS taxpayer data. And while Mayor Adams is working on executive orders that align with the Trump administration. The council is working to combat that. They passed something called the Safe Communities Act, which was passed actually during Trump's first term, that policies that enshrine New York City as a sanctuary city. We also passed legislation that ICE cannot access city databases. So let me just skip ahead. Ways that the community can help. I highly encourage you to reach out to our office if you want to learn more information about how to get personally involved. We have, I see some red cards up there. Red cards you should be passing out to your friends and neighbors. It lets you know what rights you have if ICE shows up to your door or your home, your workplace, other sensitive locations. And then, of course, you can attend events like this one, including hearings that have to do with immigration. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna. And the cards, I believe we have your cards there. They're on the table there, so please, when you leave, not yet, because we have our meeting following. Okay. And then we also have to speak. We also have to speak, Councilmember Carmen De La Rosa's representative, Jamila Sandoval.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. My apologies that the council member is not able to attend today. She had an engagement that she had to attend, and we were all double booked. So my apologies, I'm being late. I was also at Community Board 12's, one of their committee meetings. Thank you all for inviting us to speak at this time. Thank you for hosting this important event. It's something that we have been seeing across our community, but also the city of many organizations hosting informational sessions for our families. In terms of our office, the minute that the executive order was placed and all the news broke out, sorry, just give me 1 second. Sorry, I had to move my puppies out the way. The minute that we heard the news, we had a group meeting, I'm gonna say a collective meeting of about 10 to 12 organizations that deal with that have immigration services, whether that's actual citizenship or just giving them all types of services or giving them food and clothing and maybe even money for Metro cards. And we had a Zoom meeting to discuss how can our office be the best information navigator for not only for them when we get information, but for our schools. Many of the principals and parent coordinators were reaching out to us to share information with them because when the asylum seekers first came to our city, many of them came to our community. And many of our schools are housing, have new students that are from the asylum community. So we were able to meet with them and have a conversation about how to make sure that we're filtering correct information correctly. As we all know, the council member herself came from Dominican Republic when she was very young. So her family and many of our staffers actually are migrants, and we understand how difficult this must be. And we wanted to make sure that not only are we sensitive to it, but that we are have enough information. So I would like to leave my information. I don't see that there's any chat box for me to just put my name and email, but the Community Board 8 team has it to ensure that anything that you may need from our office that we can share. We continue filtering information to our schools and anybody that comes to our office. We also have a partnership with Community Citizenship Now, who has a lawyer and a paralegal within our office, and we see an influx of appointments, whether it's virtual or in person, on a weekly basis, and they come Wednesdays and Thursdays. So if anybody's interested in that, they can always contact me and I can help them get connected to Community Citizenship Now to make an appointment. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Sandoval. And we'll make sure to include your information in the minutes so that the audience will have your contact information. Please thank the council member for us as well. With that said, is there anybody who has any questions or comments? Okay, on behalf of the community board, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this session. I'd also like to have an extra thank you to Bob Bender, our community board member, who brought, well, we knew of it, but I'm glad that you nudged us on to having this event. And Farah, I know it was work because everyone was so busy, everyone was booked, and we finally got this seminar going. And needless to say, Miss Rosa Cohen-Cruz, Miss Cruz, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure you will get a lot of extra follow-up queries, and we thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you all
everybody
for
for
having
attending.
me. Really appreciate it.
We appreciate it even more. Thank you. Okay, this will conclude this forum for this evening, but we are having a community board meeting. We'll start maybe in about 2 minutes, give everybody a few minutes in case you need to go to the restroom, and then we will start our board meeting. Thank you.